Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Milton Keynes Lit Fest. And it's fantastic to see so many of you here with us tonight for our last event of the Saturday, which we are enormously looking forward to. A quick thank you. Lit Fest is made possible by support from the Centre MK, from Milton Keynes City Council, the Milton Keynes Libraries and Community Learning services, and also our parent organisation, Arts Gateway, and of course Waterstones, who are our fabulous hosts here today, to all of whom we are very grateful, and also especially to our brilliant volunteers and tech team who have really kept things going and make Litfest actually happen. So thank you all very much. The event is going to have about 45 minutes of conversation, and then there'll be time for your questions. And those of you watching from home, pop your questions in the chat, and they'll be relayed to me so I can ask those on your behalf. And after the event, of course, Harriet and Sarah will be signing their books, so you'll have the chance to meet them and get your books signed then. And now I'm absolutely delighted to welcome to the Litfest stage Harriet Tyce and Sarah Pinborough.
Welcome to Litfest, and I'm very, very, very excited to have the super talented, super successful, irritatingly successful Harriet Tyce. I should actually say
it's working. It is now. Yes. Hello. She is also she's a New York Times bestseller #1 and TV. I've had none of that. So
together.
We have known each other since we were 15. I was 15 and she was 16. Yeah. So this is going to be
we were such good students at school.
Well, I was.
You were, yeah. But she's a million copy selling, Sunday Times bestselling author, and is here to talk about this amazing and very beautiful book, Witch Trial, which is her most recent novel, went straight into Sunday Times top 10 and stayed there, has been doing super successfully all around the country. So I think we're very lucky to have her in the Keynes. I'm very glad she's come to talk to us here. So, as you know, I loved this book on my very first read of it. We share our drafts, so I read like the first draft of it, and so it was really interesting to read it again, and I loved it just as much, if not more. So before we dig into it, do you think, it's a question every author loves, you could give us a brief summary just give us a little flavor of it, an intro to it?
Well, it is a supernatural courtroom drama. Basically, it's written from the point of view of a juror who's a 50-something heart surgeon, and he is called to jury duty on a trial of two teenage girls who think that they're witches, and they're being done for the murder of another schoolgirl who has been found dead in an Edinburgh park close to the school at which they're all boarders, where they were in a sort of little coven together, essentially. So yeah, it's witches and it's law, and I loved writing it. So yeah.
In a lot of ways, this is a little bit of a departure from some of your other books. And I think the first thing to anybody coming into the opening pages of the book that is immediately different is that you have a male protagonist. So you have Matthew, who is our juror, and I mean, he's not a straightforward protagonist, is he? I mean, he's not a man without problems, would you say?
No, it's funny. I've been listening to the audiobook of it recently, and it's read by a male narrator. And yeah, he is a bit of an arse. I think it's fair to say.
I was just going to say he's got problems.
No, I think that, I mean, he's a heart surgeon, and in itself and I mean, I'm not meaning to make any kind of sweeping generalizations. Are there any heart surgeons in the house? But I had been having some dealings with an orthopedic surgeon at the time of writing who had perhaps slightly irritated me. And I rather like the idea of taking someone who's so much in charge of his own work environment and putting him into a situation where he was completely out of any of his control. Because, you know, I don't know how many people here might have done jury service. Is there anyone here? Yeah, I've got a few people putting their hands up. You're not nothing. You're not in charge of anything there. You're told when to stand. You're told when to sit. You're told what you can decide on. You're even told that you have to go through the artificial process of putting out of your mind something that one of the witnesses might say if they say the wrong thing, and then it's shut down. And it's a completely different world. And it's one that, for most people who aren't lawyers, a completely alien world. And so to take, and as is the idea of heart surgery, as is the idea of an operating theatre. So in his own world, he's God. And he is taken out of it, and he's put into a world where he's absolutely not God at all. And the more that I tortured him, the more I wanted to torture him. It was, I mean, I didn't set out, and I mean but I think from the moment that one of the first lines that, which I kept, even though I got rid of some of the opening chapters that you read, that there was, he thinks going and doing jury duty is going to be a walk in the park. He thinks it's going to be a little holiday. He wants to get away from, the blood and guts of his day job. And, what's a little bit of light court duty? No one will be able to reach him on the phone, and he can have a break. And he can have a break from, what was it? It was work, wife, other woman. And I think that sets the scene for what this man is like. And yeah, he thinks it's going to be really easy, like that James Nesbitt Yellow Pages advert where he says, "Oh, yoga, a load of ladies, how hard can it be?" And then he says, "Chiropractor," as he limps out. I had that in my head.
Which is interesting as a choice as a protagonist.
But no, there needed to be a vehicle. There needed to be a vehicle to tell the story. There was also another very kind of, this is a book about teenage witches. Really, the kind of what if here is, what if the girls from the film The Craft got done for murder? And I don't know how many people, sorry. But, The Craft was that sort of cult film in the 90s about a high school coven, which, the powers go completely mental. And there's no recourse to any kind of legal treatment. And if I had said that, then how many of the critics out there would have read it and written reviews? Because they're all men, aren't they?
Oh, and I think it's a great contrast to have this. And I do appreciate, even with my middle-aged glasses off, and we won't tell the story about the bill earlier, where I tried to signal the bill. Someone came over and I tried to take it, and she was taking a serviette to another table. And unfortunately, there was a relatively hot man, which I know he was quite hot even without my glasses on, sitting at a table, and he just started to wet himself laughing. I was like...
And I didn't have my glasses on, so I didn't see any of that.
But you have these teenage girls, which is, very much an opposing culture to this middle-aged man. And, with no offense to the middle-aged men in the audience, there is a huge swathe of white middle-aged men in very good jobs who have massive superiority complexes, or there is that sense of they still carry the hysterical woman attitude, so I think it was a great contrast, but it was just an interesting choice. And I mean, I'm not always a fan of overly likable protagonists, and I think you're similar. Like, I think
I don't do it on purpose. I never set out. I don't sort of think, what I'm going to write, let's see how much I can make them hate this one. I mean, my first novel, Blood Orange, I don't know how many people have read it, but again, quite a lot of people nodding, that I didn't realize that people were going to hate her. I knew she was complicated. I knew she was making bad decisions. It's not a manual for marriage, but it is someone who was in a very stressed and extreme position, making some dumb choices. And yet people hate Alison. People really hate Alison and talk about how much they hate what she does and how awful she is. And that shocked me, because I suppose I just thought people had more compassion and that they understand. Yeah, that was yeah. I mean, yeah, stupid. But I
think they'll have more compassion for Matthew because he's a male character.
Not according to the feedback I'm getting. But, I was kind of being, actually, I just was quite entertained by him.
I mean, I think I was very entertained by him. And actually, I think you were kinder to him in the final draft than in the first draft.
I think it had a male editor's hand.
Okay. It's a bit like when the male producer said to me once, "Can we have a man in this show that we actually like?" I was like,
No.
I'm in my 50s. Was it more difficult writing? Because he isn't also an unreliable narrator in his own way. He's not just thrown into the situation and everything else in his life is rosy. There is other stuff going on. Are there any differences, did you find, writing an unreliable narrator from a male perspective than you would do writing a female unreliable narrator? Or did you use the same kind of mental approach?
I used the same kind of mental approach, I think, simply because I was trying not to think too hard of him as a man, because I didn't want to fall into cliche about, that you have. There is this whole idea of men writing women badly, and I didn't want to be a woman writing a man badly by making him a cliche, which I think I found that easier because it was a trial, because he had a job to do as a juror. And so I could always have him, if he was getting too into some sort of existential male crisis that maybe I was just making up, I could then have him coming back and thinking about the evidence that he was supposed to be considering. So because he had a job, I was just thinking of him as a person with a job rather than specifically male, if that makes sense. I mean, I think if it had been a more of a relationship based, if we'd had him in a domestic setting more, I think it would have been harder.
Although it is interesting that he's clearly got domestic issues, but he doesn't linger on them in a way that a female narrator might be like, I wonder if he's thinking of me. Da, 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 da. He's like, yeah, right, she hasn't let me in the house. But then
he's
moves
turned
on.
his phone off. He's on his holiday.
Yeah, he's had his holiday. Before we got onto the girls, the jurors in the book, I think, are, because it is quite creepy. I salute that because, I love the creepiness, and you've got the creepiness in there. And it is dark, it's quite a tragic book in a lot of ways. But these jurors, they make me laugh. That, it's a real cross section of the population. And I mean, obviously, they really do add those little moments of spice to it. But was any of those kind of come out of experience with juries yourself when you were a barrister, or did you just approach it? How did you approach putting that jury together? Because they're not one I'd want judging me.
I mean, the problem about juries, of course, is it is a completely arbitrary, random selection of members of the public. So there's no way that you can legislate who you get. Not here, anyway, not in Scotland. I mean, unlike in the US, where there's a whole selection process. I mean, I will admit to the use of AI here. I don't know if I'm allowed to do. Oh, no, the Society of Authors, you can use AI, just not for writing. I asked AI to suggest a list. Don't make. Oh, I thought you were looking at me with scorn there. No, because I wanted to get a truly representative.
Very lazy, Harriet. Very lazy. I'm all for that.
I wanted a truly representative cross section of sort of properly diverse Scottish jury, and so I asked it to spit out names for me, and it gave me a mix of names, so people clearly from different backgrounds, and then I threw in a couple of names from school, Neil Mackay and Russell McLean. I didn't ask their permission, and these
I kept seeing them as well. They'd go out for a fag. I'd be like, yeah, well, they would, wouldn't they? Yeah.
No, this was that they were a bit. I didn't ask these friends for permission to use their names, and then they read it and they're like, "You what?" But nothing bad happens to them; they're fine. And because you have, and in Scotland, the jury has 15 members, so you've got 15 people to play with. I only did 2 jury trials. I mean, I had the most unillustrious career as a barrister. Never has a really short, rubbish career carried more fruit, can I just say? The fact that I ended up talking to the Minister for Justice about being a barrister recently was a bit like, I'm out of my depth here. But I do know you get everyone bringing in different opinions, different prejudices, different life experience. And I've watched 12 Angry Men, and I know that, people argue the course. And so
Emma was a particular favourite.
Emma was I just thought about the worst kind of person, those sort of people who pretend that they don't want the blood and guts, but actually they're reading the that they're reading the Daily Mail for the crime, not for the fashion. And that they're the ones who are sort of really pearl clutching about child abuse cases, but they're listening to true crime podcasts at night, and it's that sort of the people who'd be on the front row at the hangings. and not to see justice done, but because they want to see that, the
They'd take
civil.
snacks.
Yeah, they're doing their knitting. And that was not, she wasn't hard. She just sprang into my head, absolutely fully formed, and I hate her.
She's also unintentional comedy gold, like
Still
she is
semi-intentional.
yeah, but I mean in her life she doesn't realize that she's comedy gold, but she is one of those people that, and they're all kind of moving. I just thought it was really, the jury for me was like a really nice light,
because you have that opportunity to have this chorus of these people, and because aspects of it really are dark. It is about a murder. It's a murder trial at the heart of it, and it's also has occult rituals and aspects of the supernatural, which I try and make frightening. And I'm really glad that you think they're creepy, because my God, this book is creepy. That is such a creepy. I read that.
story.
I read it's if that's a love story. I read that in a house in the middle of the country. We live here now, and I was messaging her, just going, "Oh my God!" And all the lights were out, and there were flies, and I went home back to London. Thank you. So no, I'm very glad that you found it creepy. But because of that, I found it important to try and balance off the dark and the light, and that you can only spend that much time in a situation of horror without, we all make terrible jokes at moments of tragedy as a way of just alleviating tension. And I think that's what the jury were doing, that they would just sort of pop up at one moment or another saying something stupid. And it was quite fun.
Good. But at the core of the case, we have 4 teenage girls. We have 2 that are on trial, Eliza and Isabel, who are accused of causing the death of a 3rd Christian, and the 4th is their friend Sasha, who's called as a witness. So we have this very tight group of sort of toxic friendships at school. And what I liked is how our sympathies shift between them. And I think I called the book Slippery in a blurb. And I think the whole nature of the trial is slippery. The whole nature of the charge is slippery. And I don't think I'm giving anything away because it's on page 22. I checked. But when
we'll lose them, we have to draw them in.
But the charge isn't a straightforward, oh, they were found over the body covered in blood with a knife. They stabbed them. It's a much more slippery charge of, was there even a crime? Should they be on trial for murder? It was quite a bold move. And I'm really glad your editors didn't make you change it, because there was a bit of worry, wasn't there, that it was going to be like, actually, can you have them with a smoking gun over the body? But was it because you wanted to play with this occulty vibe that you wanted to keep it a little bit more open?
Well, I think it was one of the main inspirations for this was, well, there were many, but I'd read a book called The Department of, oh, I'm having a blank about it. That it was something like the Department of Presentiments, or of the one I mean. It's so basically a psychiatrist called Barker set up a Premonitions Bureau. That's it, the Premonitions Bureau. So it's an amazing book. The psychiatrist set up a PO box that in the 50s, I think it was. And he wanted people to write in whenever they had a particularly bad dream that felt particularly realistic of a disaster happening. I think the author's Sam McKnight of the book. And because he wanted to test, he believed that some people do have premonitions of disasters, and that he was wanting to see the best way to do it would be to get a contemporaneous record of the dream, and then you see if something terrible happens. And I read that book and I found it absolutely fascinating, but there was a detail in it that this chap Barker had also written a book which is called Scared to Death. And that was about how it is possible, he said, to scare people to death. And so you could have, if you had a person in a position of authority, say a doctor goes to someone in a hospital bed who, their health could go one way or the other, and the doctor says, you're going to die tonight. There's actually a chance, says Barker, that person's going to die tonight, not necessarily because they would have done, but just because there's something about the mindset. And so I got hold of the book. It's out of print. And it was fascinating. It was absolutely fascinating. And just went down a wormhole of thinking about if you, and I had also read separately about this horrible thing that can happen in cyberbullying. So, if someone has epilepsy, it can be triggered by flashing lights. And there's been a spate of people sending messages to those that they know have epilepsy with messages that contain flashing lights to try and trigger an attack. And I thought that that was, and it's not at the moment covered by, because it's one step ahead of the law because it's such a new technology and the law keeps having to go back and fill in loopholes. And that just got me thinking about, if you scare somebody, if someone's got a heart condition and you do something really to frighten them and then they have a heart attack, how guilty are you and what are you guilty of? And that's basically the crux. And it is page 22 where we have the indictment. So sorry we've spoiled that bit, but no more. But no, I mean it is the idea, because the book has got a level of ambiguity. And I love it when you don't exactly know what's happened and it could be this or it could be that. And that was fun and really interesting to play with. And it was a bit more, I found it more interesting than the idea of just sort of standing over the body with the knife.
Yeah, totally. And just the kind of the Macbeth references and stuff, there is this real kind of premonition-y vibe to it, and the undercurrent is all there. And it's like, I remember a friend of mine being terminally ill, my ex-father-in-law, and he was a nurse as well, and he said you should never say to people how long they've got because people will die to order. So it ties in with,
That's
so if
exactly
you
the
tell someone
Barker
they've
point.
got
That
3
was
weeks,
exactly-
they will start ticking the
That was
days
exactly
off,
the
you know?
Barker point. If it's somebody who's qualified to say it, if I say that to you, meaningless.
Yeah.
But if a doctor does, then
And we still, I think what I really loved about it was, although all these people in the jury, I was going to say the audience, in the jury, in the trial room, are often poo-pooing these girls with their beliefs, but we still salute magpies and we still don't walk under ladders and we still have the lucky knife, the bad knife in the drawer, like the unlucky fork.
I don't have a lucky knife. Maybe
might
I should.
be a little bit.
What's the use saying there?
I do have an unlucky fork that I just don't use.
Whoa.
Don't know why it's unlucky. I've never used it. So, but okay, we don't walk under ladders, and we salute magpies. But we still live in this. And I guess witch trials of old, like if you reference them in Edinburgh, they wouldn't have thought they were old-fashioned then. So it's.
And I think that's it. That there's another great big source of resource was the Uncanny podcast, the Danny Robbins, and he's got that phrase, "You want to believe," and you don't know what you don't know. To quote Danny, what's his name, Donny Rumsfeld, that there are unknown unknowns. There are things, and that you can be completely rational and sensible. But I know I hedge my bets about things, and that if I do spill salt, I will chuck a bit over my shoulder. If I see a ladder, I'm like, yeah, I'll just why something might drop. It's illogical, but it also isn't, because it's a sort of an emotional response. And I think that the thing I wanted to do with the trial was to have something where everyone's like, obviously this is bollocks, but yet there's this thing. And the more loudly you say it, the more it is that you're actually maybe thinking there could be a truth to it. And it's that juxtaposition, that kind of tension that
these girls have kind of got tied into it, haven't they? Because they all, what I liked is they all have a very different relationship with the occult and the idea of it, and some are more into it than others, and so it does take on almost a school bullying kind of mentality, doesn't it? They're tied into each other in this toxic teenage friendship thing, and toxic friendships do feature in a lot of your books, don't they? Toxic, I know
we knew each other at school.
Yeah.
But I think that's it. I think that it's before we were at the same school with each other, which was a boys' school, it just had 30 girls in the sixth, 28 girls in the sixth form, and it was interesting. It was fun. It was great fun. Oh yeah, we enjoyed it. I think for some it was less fun, but we were all right.
All girls schools before.
This is it, but that's what I was going to say. The all girls school bit, my God. Because if you had Lord of the Flies and you made it all girls, it would be like death by a thousand cuts. The nastiness of it. I'm not saying boys, and boys being thugs, that's, again, not to generalize, but there is something. I think the thing I found most frightening writing in this was not so much the occult the supernatural. It's the use of the silent treatment, and that there's a spate where somebody is treated as if she doesn't exist, that she's not there in the room, and that for me is probably the worst nightmare at all. You know, the thing where you walk into a room and you see your family and they look at you as if you're a stranger. That I find, and that's what girls do. You know, in one moment you're friends with someone and the next they just won't speak to you. It's
Yeah,
awful.
we had like if a girl wasn't being spoken to in the boarding house in Bedford, they'd come like you could have a table full of tea, and it happened to all of us at some point. But if you sat down or the person sat down, everyone else would just get up and walk away. And they'd just leave him on the table. And it was, you know, like I think girls can be meaner. We don't beat each other up in the same way.
There's a cruelty to it. There's a real cruelty to it. So yeah, that was something. And I think the all girl, yeah, I mean, I'd say I was scarred by going to an all girls school, and that I continue to, and yeah, and some of the dynamics of friendships that come from that, and you sort of see it when you have like there's a best friend and then there's another best friend, and who's your best friend, and that triangulation, and there's a power play underneath all of it, which is very interesting if you're not directly involved.
And did you, when you were at school, did you ever do like we did all the light as a feather, stiff as a board, light as a feather? Did you do any of that?
Hell no.
Didn't you?
I was no. People did, and I was terrified of it. I mean, I absolutely
You were so
terrified.
scared when you were writing this book.
Yeah, no, I
think,
didn't.
some
I
of it.
don't really do witches. I don't really
Clearly.
because, well, I mean,
It's in flipping neon.
no, well, it looks as if I've embraced it now. I think maybe I've got my nervous system more under control since giving up drinking or something. But no, I never liked the. Again, it goes back to that thing of, you know, you want to believe, you don't want to believe. Is it not? I mean, my sense was that something like a Ouija boards were just best not messed with just in case. And the more research I did as I was writing this book, the more I realized I was right. And it's the same with tarot. I mean, tarot and I have had a bit of a weird experience in the last year, in that it's, you know, never having consulted tarot cards at all. You know, that's exactly, I would never go near it. But I taught myself to a little bit about them for the book. And, you know, I've asked a few questions over the last year, and generally year and a half, and generally the steering's been correct. But anyway,
You're less into the creepy than me. But when I wrote Dead to Her, I bought tarot cards, never opened them. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to make the shit up.
well, I'm
too scared. I was too scared
I
of
think
it.
that I was a bit foolhardy, and now they're very respectfully wrapped up in the bottom of the wardrobe, and we won't be asking them any more questions. Let's just say they were useful in the castle,
The school.
and you're allowed to take them.
We'll come to the castle later. The school the girls go to is called St. Jude's.
The patron saint of lost causes.
Yeah, I looked it up because I'm a bit ignorant, but I thought it was really interesting, given how sad they all are, these girls, really underneath it all. And it's a very privileged school, and they're very privileged kids. Did you ever consider setting it in a comprehensive school or a Scottish equivalent of a comprehensive school?
I think I was. It had to be Fettes, which is the school that it
The
is,
rival
because
school.
our rival school. But the point about Fettes is that if you look it up, you will see that it is the most extraordinary Gothic building. And I'm fairly certain that J.K. Rowling will have had it in mind when she was writing about Hogwarts, because it is, for a school, it's mental. You know, it's got these massive spires, and it just looks like this. Exactly, and you can see it. It sort of stands out on the Edinburgh skyline. It's ludicrous, and because it's next to this park where there's allotments, and I thought, oh, allotments have got sheds, and bad things can happen in sheds. And I knew someone who boarded there, and I knew that he used to sneak out at night. So I thought, well, it would not be impossible for people to sneak out at night if they wanted to do coven things. And I do think as well that what I was thinking about was, it was the, you know, the people who have parents who are sort of cash rich, time poor. I mean, there wasn't my prejudice against boarding schools coming through directly, but that was kind of in my head, you know.
Fascination, I think, with, you know, you look back at when we grew up, it was Mallory Towers and and then you go to these schools, and I think there is a fascination, and I think what was clever is there's also a fascination about posh kids doing bad things. You know, like we almost have this. You know, I used to teach in Luton, and people would expect those kids to do bad things. But when you have posh kids in trouble,
I think having been a posh kid who did bad things, it didn't seem. There is a sort of level as well of writing what I know. I mean, you know, I never actually hexed anyone, but
we tried.
Yeah. Well, not then anyway.
And Edinburgh is a great setting for the book, and you've used Edinburgh before, but for this one, it's very much a character. And what did you like to sort of pick up from Edinburgh to put in the book?
Well, Edinburgh should have been a no-brainer, and actually it wasn't to begin with, because I was going to set it in London just because, you know, I know the Old Bailey a bit and I was an English barrister, so I understood how the whole procedure worked. But the thing I got stuck with, and so this has ended up really being a plotting decision to begin with, was that you've got courtroom drama start to finish, juror. That means he's going to have to pay attention to the prosecution opening speech. You can't have him zoning out. And the prosecution opening speech is going to give away the whole thing, because it's going to say what all the witnesses are going to say. And the only way then to make it interesting for the reader and not have them going, yeah, we know this, would be to have each of the witness saying something different. And that was feeling like a real logistical nightmare. And I was up in Edinburgh seeing my parents, and my father is a retired Scottish judge. And I was moaning about this thing. I'm really stuck because I don't know how to, you know, what he's just going to fall asleep for 3 chapters. That doesn't work. And he said, didn't you know? Because he tends to think people should know things. But didn't I know that there were no opening speeches in Scots law, in Scottish trials? So it seemed easier to go and learn Scots law from start to finish than it was to do something clever with plotting. But the thing is that the more, though, that I thought about Edinburgh, it's absolutely perfect. And it was one of those not seeing the wood for the trees, because the history of persecution of women and men accused of witchcraft in Scotland was far more than it was in England. I mean, pockets of England, absolutely, you know, sort of Essex, Pendle, you know, that there were places. But Edinburgh, there were 300 people executed on the Esplanade and along the East Lothian coast. If you actually look up the whole history of it, because James VI and the First was completely obsessed because he thought that witches had plotted to drown him on a boat trip. And because of that, it meant that that history kind of seeped its way into the pages. And Edinburgh itself as a city has got the core that's the grade 1 listed World Heritage Site that everyone thinks, oh, you know, it's lovely. It's sort of shortbread and bagpipes. But yet, in the 80s, it was the AIDS capital of Europe. The rate of drugs deaths is huge. Train spotting, you know, it can support both train spotting and, you know, sort of, what's his name, Alexander McCall Smith, who's, you know, ever so civilized. And it is both of these things. It is Jekyll and Hyde. And so playing with that was, I mean, without that, the book would just not, it wouldn't even have worked.
It just felt so right. Yeah. It really is steeped into the page.
And I mean, and it's been so lovely actually to write about. I mean, I love writing about Edinburgh, but this one really felt like a love letter to the place, even though I made it dead creepy.
Well, it has its moments, doesn't it? I'm very well aware of time, but it obviously would not be a Harriet Tyce novel without at least one stonkingly excellent twist at the end. So there is some excellent, really good twist at the end.
I love the twist.
Yeah. And, you know, it's like kind of like a little knock-on of twists. There's a lot, you know, the last sort of chunk is really good fun. And obviously in this, it works excellently. Do you think, as a writer, when we look at newer writers coming through, do you think there is still do you think there is a pressure on people to always have to have a twist in a book? Do you feel a pressure to always have to have a twist in a thriller?
Well, I mean, I do, because people are like, yeah, you do twists, don't you? So I think, oh God, have I got to? And I think there have been, I mean, since Gone Girl, I mean, Behind Her Eyes, excuse me, that's like the killer of all twists. That was phenomenal. It's it is nice to pull the rug out from under people and to, I mean, and if it's a proper twist where you actually have to almost go back to the beginning and read the book again, going, hang on.
It's a proper.
I mean, but those ones I think come along so rarely. And honestly, it only works, I think, if it actually has presented itself during the writing of the book. I think if you start with, I know what will be really clever, and then you engineer backwards, I'm not convinced
I did that with Behind a Right.
Did you? My God. Okay, well, there's always an exception to every rule because
the final chapter was in my book pitch.
Bloody hell. Well, and it was truly WTF. I mean, honestly, when I got to that, I was just I mean, no, everything about that.
We had to talk about
No, well, I don't care though. Shut up. You know, her paperback was out on Thursday and it is bloody brilliant. So if you haven't read We Live Here Now, you should. But I think that there must be that pressure on debut authors.
That's a good reveal. You know, like sometimes books can have a really great reveal, but I feel like everyone always has to say, oh my God.
Well, I think if it's a psych thriller, it's got a twist, and if it's a police procedural, it's got a reveal, I guess would be one kind of difference. But I didn't expect it to do this. I have to say that this was, I had thought that I was doing one thing and then this other thing just presented itself. I mean, when I wrote A Lesson in Cruelty, that I did set as a target for myself that I wasn't going to get letters from readers or, you know, messages from readers saying I knew who it was at page 37. Because, you know, readers are very clever and it is cat and mouse because we are trying to keep a step ahead of you. You know, and I feel frustrated if I've worked it out, which is annoying because actually it shouldn't just be about who, it should be the whole book and the whole kind of arc of it and how it's earned. But it was fun to have it, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to do that again, but I'm just going to have to be appreciative of the fact that I have and enjoy that.
So which trial has paranoia, accusations, suspicions, smoke and mirrors?
I know where you're going.
Secret meetings in cloaks in the middle of the night. So once you'd finished writing this for several months and poured your heart in it, you thought, I know what I'll do. And you went and did the Traitors. So how was that going from finishing this book, which you kind of finished this and went straight in, if I recall correctly?
Well, I finished this I'd handed in the first draft at the end of October of 24, and I put the application in the middle of December, and it was months of, you know, it's a process to try and get onto it because I think they had 300,000 applicants or something. I mean, it's a ludicrous number. It will have been more this year, I'm sure, but it's a very long multi-stage process. And I don't know, the more I did it, the more I thought, well, but there was no plan. I mean, the thing that you don't mention is that in this book, there's both a dead cat and a dead pigeon.
So there is also the phrase, well, they've only set the cat amongst the pigeons.
Yeah.
So I was like,
I mean, there's a bit, the thing that's been really weird about it, the thing that was really weird about it, and it did kind of get into my head was, you know, we have in this book someone who is sort of essentially sequestered in an environment, gets no outside information, and is being fed all this evidence on which he has to decide who's telling the truth and who's lying. And he becomes more and more immersed in it, such that it feels completely real. It's his only lived kind of situation while he's going off and perhaps consulting things like tarot cards, and he maybe it has an effect on him that's a bit negative. And as I got to the end of a sequestered, paranoid environment where there was no one to talk to but the walls, and I'd gone a bit mad. It was, it's been really weird. The parallels between the book and me and it.
Reading it, I was like, I'm really seeing the parallels. Especially because obviously we spoke when you came out. And
I was really freaked out about it. No, I mean, I think this book has a life of its own. But I will say this book has been in several churches through the tour. And we have spoken, I've met 2 vicars, I think, at least in the process of this. My cousin is a deacon and she's not said it's cursed. So, and I've not yet burst into flames. So Let's just keep hoping. We'll touch wood about that. Um, you see, totally superstitious.
I haven't got my glasses on, so I could be asking for the bill or talking to a hot man. Did you say 3 minutes before questions? Okay, cool. So what did you learn about yourself in the car? You're just never going to do it again.
Never do reality television again.
But was there anything that you'd use in your writing?
What I was fascinated by was the fact that, I mean, they are so clever at what they create. The world that they create there in the castle and the game is so immersive that it's possible, if you have a very active imagination, as I do, to feel that it's completely real, because it was real. I was in a situation where people were trying to murder me and I was trying to find out who was trying to murder me. So it's no wonder I thought it was true, and the stakes felt very high for me. And not about winning, but just about survival, basically. It turned out I didn't like being lied to.
Well, you're I mean, obviously I've known you a long time, and you are a very straightforward person. You're a very clear sense of right and wrong, and you do not like duplicity. So you really chose well with your reality TV show you went into.
So I think, though, that but I think the whole power of the game to me comes from the fact that it's a game. 100% it's a game, and everybody could be a traitor if they were tapped on the shoulder. So being a traitor does not make you a bad person. And when you lie as a traitor, you are doing your job, as we've all agreed to do. So that is categorically the case. The thing is, though, on an emotional level, there was a part of my brain, at least, and I'm sure other people's too, that when you are being lied to, when you are being deceived, you still feel as angry as you would do if it weren't a game. And so you've got to have that balance between making sure that you hold the rational, it's a game, with the but I also feel it. And I think
you're
that
tired as well.
Oh, and you're
the time
too.
because you're there all day and half the night,
and you don't really sleep, even though there's time to sleep. But I think I think it's that's where the drama, I think, from the show comes from, is that gap between reality and emotion, and how they I mean, I'm not going to say we are manipulated, but it is manipulated because it's an immersive psychological environment which is designed to elicit a dramatic response without anyone actually being killed, and so they've got to sort of hold that whole balance, and I think they do it brilliantly well.
And you were exceptionally awesome.
Thank you. But I do have a question in my head, which I think is something I would like to explore in fiction, is what if it went wrong? And what if someone doesn't snap out of it? What if you still thought you were in the castle like 10 years on? I mean, God, that'd be awful.
I think we have to open it up for questions now. You're going to be the roving Mike, Flora. Has anybody got a question for Harriet? Don't be shy. No one gets out alive if we don't get any questions. Just say.
No, you'll be here not till midnight.
It'll be very awkward. We're just
we need is one, and then everyone will start. Just one person. Go on. Just one. Oh, there's a hand right at the back. See the enthusiasm.
Hi, thank you. Question to both of you, actually. If you could only read one of your books, what book would you read?
I'm going to say this one because it's my favorite. And I shouldn't really have a favorite, but it's just, I think it was the one that I had the most enjoyment in writing, and it makes me laugh the most, even though it's also probably the darkest.
Well, if I was going to read one of my own books, I'd probably read one of the ones I wrote 20 years ago. It's got no fucking idea what happens in there.
I've got a question from the online audience. What makes a memorable villain? One that keeps people wanting to keep turning the pages to read more of, rather than just being turned off by?
I think it helped their heart.
As with most things.
I think they have to be a combination of good and bad, because I think if they're just complete psychopaths, that's not necessarily very interesting. I think you have to give people an aspect of humanity, and if not humanity, then hotness.
And also people are not the villain in their own story. So the baddie doesn't think they're a baddie. And I think as long as they like themselves, there's nothing worse than a self-pitying baddie.
Oh yeah, no self-pity.
I've read Witch Trial and I 5 stars, absolutely loved it. It felt really poignant reading it in 2026 with the way women's rights are being eroded and also division in class. I got really, really angry at the way one of the girls was treated. Did that influence your story at all, the changes in society towards, well, wealth division and also gender division?
I think that that is something that is always at the back of my mind when I'm writing, particularly in terms of, I mean, the pressures on girls. And I have a teenage daughter, and so I've seen her come through school, and I've seen what social media has done to, I mean, it was bad enough when we were young, but to have to grow up through a time of social media is kind of unthinkable, and they're in the Wild West at the moment. And the way that double standards still exist, even though we don't I wasn't looking at that so much, but that, I mean, yes, basically that there is, I don't think this book is, I have done more diatribe books in the past, and I think I'll probably do more diatribe books in the future. But this, I sort of felt that just having it there was enough for it to be something for people to go away and think about. And I do think that boarding schools can encourage, because if you're in a boarding school without the same level of privilege as others, it's yes, yes, kind of. I was also, I'm afraid, just playing with teenage witches, so I'm not going to try and be too high. I'd make high-minded claims about book 4 in particular, which has a lot about prison and my views on criminal justice, and particularly how it relates to women in prisons. This I was messing. There's a very serious campaign called the Witches of Scotland, which has been campaigning to do retrospective pardons for all the people who were convicted of witchcraft offences, because it was clearly just such a misogynistic process. And I've treated it as if witches are real. So I don't think I've been very helpful. But no, you can't help but, anyone who's got any awareness of how society is it's going to inform writing, and it always does.
Harriet said something at a Christmas party I had. My friend Emma said, "Oh my God, isn't it so?" She said to Harriet, "Isn't it so weird? Like both of you were in the same class at school, and you're both like really successful authors." And Harriet said, "Yeah, it's almost like we went to a super privileged school where they taught us that we could be whatever we wanted and gave us super confidence, but made us fit, And she was like, "Oh yeah." So she's very, I think you're very aware of that kind of.
I do read The Guardian and live in Islington, if that's any good.
Hi there, Nancy Stevens from Horizon Radio. Just finished the book this afternoon, so I didn't want any spoilers tonight. Fantastic. I've read all your books in the last 10 days actually, because I knew tonight was approaching, but loved them. They were all very, very different, as you said. This is incredibly different to, say, Blood Orange. Any books likely to be commissioned for film or TV? Because they're all juicy as.
Blood Orange we've tried and failed twice with options. I mean, actually, the first time round, it would have been made by a short-lived short form, which was going to be like 10-minute episodes, and it would have been so awful that I was actually really glad it didn't. I'd rather it wasn't made at all than it was made badly. I am in the process of signing a contract for Witch Trial with what looked like a really good, interesting production company, and I'm hopeful, but it's. I mean, Sarah has done extremely well on this, but it's not an easy process.
No, it's hard.
And I mean, how many books you've written? 25.
Yeah, and I'm writing TV, so it's and even then it's hard to get them across a desk.
So I mean, I have everything crossed. What I just try and do is write the best book I can. I try and write the best book I can without thinking about how it would work on screen. I mean, and to be honest, I mostly watch reality TV, so I don't bring in a great sort of in-depth film. Though I am riffing on Vertigo a bit with this. I've seen like one Hitchcock film, so I referred to it.
It's Vertigo meets The Craft.
Yeah, Vertigo meets the Craft, exactly that. No, we like that one. Fingers crossed, but I'm proud of the book, and even if it is never made, it's done what I wanted it to do, and that's the best I can say.
Hello, fellow girls' school survivor.
We salute you.
We also had a few boys come to join us in sixth form, which was fun.
For them, I'm sure.
Do you think that any of the people that you were on the Traitors with will appear in any of your future novels? Like you've used some character names from school before.
Oh, I don't know if I can answer that question. I mean, no, to be honest, I'm not. I think I probably wouldn't use anyone's. I mean, I use the names of people who are, who are friends. And there were two bullies who I kind of riff on their names just about every book. Hello, Caroline Napier. And Carol Nussey. But no, I wouldn't be able to use their names because, I think if you Google that, you need names which are kind of quite generic or people who wouldn't mind it, and you can't do anything too awful to them. And in terms of their personalities, well, I couldn't possibly comment. No, I mean, put it this way, that if I were to write Death at the Round Table, for example, then that would quite rightly belong to Studio Lambert and the BBC. They can't copyright my brain, in the sense that my psychological experience of being there, of thinking it was real, I think is something I would play with sideways. And I'm sure that aspects of how it felt to be lied to, or those kinds of things, I won't be able to help but put them in, just because I write about, I mean, I did a whole book about the school run. I mean, I use whatever I can get. But I don't think anything directly. And I mean, and no, none of the people that I write about are, the only one who's sort of semi-real is the one that's sort of me sometimes. The others are very much amalgamations of, or ciphers, or
And using a name is not the same as using a person, is it?
I mean, if they said I could, but I think actually I think, oh God, I must remember to include this person, because I think we just auctioned, people sometimes in charity auctions can pay to have their name in a thriller. So I've got someone. I need to remember to include them in the book. Good. Thank you for that reminder.
When you're writing your books, when you've got your first idea, how do you go about structuring them? Like, do you know what the ending is, or do you work a different way around each book? What's the sort of structure?
I sort of know the ending. It doesn't necessarily always end up being the ending, and it doesn't necessarily always end up happening to the person that I thought it would. I mean, I plan-ish, but it's not, I try not to spend too long on the process, just because if I poke it too much, it'll fall apart. But I tend to start thinking I know what's going on, and then the more I write, the more I realize I don't. I'm not very. The first draft is kind of the finding it out, and then I sort of tighten it up with editing. And I mean, sometimes things come together better in first draft than others. I mean, this wasn't too much editing. I mean, there was a lot, but not like awful. A Lesson in Cruelty, my fourth book, was appalling. In the third book, It Ends at Midnight. Between the first draft and the second, we switched who died, which is, how make that make sense. And I didn't know the ending. I knew the ending of Blood Orange, but not to whom it was going to happen. I was sort of, which man? They're both awful.
Mine was not necessarily about your book, but more about your writing experience, because you've talked about completing the UEA MA course, and I just wondered what important things you learnt from that and how it still shapes your writing, if it still does.
This was a very specific craft point that no, there were a few bits. My tutor had very firm views on Scrivener, which is a writing program where you can put things on what look like index cards, and then you can move them around, so you can keep chopping the text round. And there are some psychological thrillers which have got, that you've got lots of different characters' names and you keep swapping from one to the other. And it doesn't really make sense necessarily because the story's been chopped up, and it's because they've used Scrivener because they can do it. And he thought that was terrible. He thought that you should just sort of write it as it comes. And I know that's really specific, but he was always like, where's the fictive present? And so trying to keep in mind the fictive. Yeah, well, and so that was that one. I'm always like, oh God, but where's my fictive present? But that's really specific. And there was another thing you didn't like was jumping between characters' heads, which in a book about astral, yeah, you'd hate that. But no, those are sort of really, they were just his particular bugbears. And it would take quite a lot for me to throw those habits off now, because if I catch myself doing the thing he didn't like, I would always pull it back. I think the main thing though that I took from it was to take crime seriously as a genre, and rather than being sort of, oh, it's all a bit commercial, actually thinking, no, this is a completely valid, good literature.
I just think it just means lots of people like it,
And that's brilliant.
like, and actually there is some brilliant crime and there's some shit crime, there's some brilliant romantasy, there's some shit romantasy, there's some brilliant fantasy, there's some shit fantasy, like it's just there's so much snobbery in it.
No, exactly that's, I mean, and I think to have but to have it actually taken seriously, I think was because it should be taken seriously, even if it's, I mean, just like, you can take reality TV seriously. I can't bear it when people are sneering at popular culture, because, what author doesn't want readers? It's ludicrous to go, no, I don't, I just want 3 readers and a prize. I mean,
about to say
prizes would be nice, but, frankly, I want readers. I love readers. So it's
cash in the bank. That's what I want.
Well, yeah, that I was trying to sound slightly better than you there.
Like the internal voice.
She is, but
don't
say that bit out loud. Not that bit out loud, Sarah. But yeah, I mean, it was a brilliant course overall. But yeah, I mean, loads. I could do you a whole list. I won't, but I could.
I think it gave you some confidence as well.
Yes,
when you were doing it. I remember when you were doing it, fired you up to get that book finished, I think, which is the key part of it.
And on that, we've actually run out of time. So that was absolutely fantastic. Can I have a huge round of applause, please, for Harriet and Sarah? It's been a pleasure to have you two here tonight, and I can see you're going to be carrying on the conversation long after we've gone. So thank you very, very much for that. Brilliantly entertaining.
Thank you.
Wonderful to have you in
Thank
Milton Keynes.
all for coming.
Yes, and thank you all very much for coming. This is the last event for tonight. We've got a few things happening tomorrow. If you are a writer and want to know more about the craft, we've got 3 writing workshops tomorrow during the day. You can pick up a leaflet over there, followed by our finale, which is not that craft, sorry. The craft of writing, followed by Voices of Milton Keynes.